Hey, sports fans and fans of sport. How are we doing this week? We missed last week. We missed you all. Hugh, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing very good. Very good. It's a very interesting week upcoming here on the Bearded Sports Channel. We have quite a bit to talk about today. There is a lot happening in the UFC world, and there's some big boys having a bit of a I don't know. What's another word for a fight? I was trying to think of something quite clever for fight.
Scrap?
Yeah.
Ruckus?
Bit of a scrap. Yeah. A bit of a brouhaha. Maybe that's what I was thinking. Possibly.
Okay.
We have, what do we have coming up here? And I actually didn't change the branding. There we go. Nobody noticed that.
No one knows. Well, we got UFC 60, Sean. UFC 60 is next weekend. So a week today, we will find out the results of that. And the headline fight, as we've just put up on the banner there, Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou. And this is their second fight, the rematch. They fought a couple of years ago. And I believe you've been doing some homework on it, Sean. Have you been looking at both of the fighters?
Yeah, so I started looking. I looked at, and again, I'm appreciative of the UFC for bringing in fighters to the new UFC fan with names that are really difficult to pronounce. I looked at Miocic second, and I went into it thinking, oh man, I had left it sort of the last minute to get myself caught up, and it took me no more than 3 minutes to watch the entirety of the last three Ngannou fights. And he scares the shit out of me.
I know, right?
He scares but it was an interesting evolution, because then I went to Miocic. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you did.
Miocic. And when I looked at his history, so this is from an outsider joining the UFC world. His last three fights were with the same guy, and it was Daniel Cormier, which I've only heard him speak. I've not seen him fight outside of the three fights against Miocic. And I also noted that Miocic hasn't fought that much in the last 3 years, really. I think his last three fights with the same guy, which I didn't know. But the first fight with Cormier, is it Cormier?
Yeah,
that's it. UFC people in the name.
DC, Daniel Cormier.
DC, really, really well. Because I thought at the beginning of that fight with Cormier, he was pretty much going to take Cormier out, and Cormier just kept hitting him with these jabs, just getting in close and just really quick hands. And then the next two fights were well fought, but I think it was pretty straightforward that Miocic won. And then I realized that Miocic before that had fought Ngannou. And in that fight, I remember thinking, because watching the Ngannou fights, because I watched the Ngannou fights before I actually found out there was a Miocic Ngannou won. Miocic took a strategy that none of the other fighters took in that fight. And again, I only saw it. I didn't hear the commentary. I haven't heard any of the analysis, but it looked like he was going to use his grappling as sort of his advantage in that fight, and pretty much took it to Ngannou onto the mat, tried to get control of him and not get into a striking bout with him. And I'm curious if that's what the next fight's going to be like.
Yeah, so let's bring any viewers up to speed that didn't watch the first fight. Rolling into that, Ngannou is undefeated. This guy from Africa, he moved from Cameroon, made his way up on an epic voyage of 18 months or 14 months to get up and make his way to Paris, France, where he was homeless, living on the streets and training, all of which was to become a professional boxer. And then he learned martial arts because they thought he was going to be really good at MMA, started making some money through fights, and then he's in the UFC. And he's knocking people out left, right, and center. And like you said, a scary guy. The heavyweight division starts at 205 and is capped at 265. He has to cut weight to come into 265. And Sean, he's not cut weight, like he's got fat to lose. Like he's a lean, rich 265. And one hell of a scary man. Like you said, his knockouts, like of Alistair Overeem, that fight where he does the uppercut and Alistair's chin goes up. He's a K1 world champion. That's a kickboxing, world-class kickboxer heavyweight guy that he knocked out there. So he's no mug on his feet. So he's been knocking people out left, right, and center, recorded the hardest punch in history. This guy's the African nightmare type of thing. And Stipe did exactly what needed to be done. Let's see what he's like on his back. Because Stipe is not renowned for his wrestling, although I can't remember whether he was all state. I don't know if you have that to hand, Sean, but I know that he's not a world-class wrestler, but he was an accomplished wrestler, at least at the state or national level.
Yeah.
But Stipe also went on to win, I think it was the Golden Gloves Award. So he's got a background of like boxing as well as wrestling. So he just took Ngannou down, and Ngannou was like, even for me, Sean, it was rudimentary what he could do. Like on his back, he looked helpless. I'm not joking you, but I would have been more accomplished at defending myself on my back with Stipe on me. Technically wise, Ngannou looked like a lost boy, like on his back, and Stipe just leaned on him. He exposed him completely, and we then thought, well, this is Ngannou over now. The whole thing is done. Like the dream is over. We all know how to beat him. But Ngannou has then gone on a tear since one is, I think it was his last 3 to book a rematch with Miocic. So how much has he learned in that space of time? He's been working a lot on his wrestling and his ground game. So, and also his stand-up. So are we going to see something different or not? I'll give my predictions in a moment, but yeah, it's like no one knows right now. But what are your thoughts?
I'm struggling to pick because my heart tells me Ngannou. But watching Miocic, he's a very intelligent fighter. One thing I noticed with him, and I was saying to you earlier, he reminds me of Jan Blachowicz in the way he defends punches, because he's very good at making sure punches are glancing many times. And it's this thing where both those big men, they're always ready to move back and move back very quickly, not necessarily in like a I don't know, a good looking way, but you see their heads are always coming back, and it's real. Like whenever they read the punch coming, they just start moving back. They don't stand there, hold their ground, and counter. They're very selective about when they counter punch. And I think he's going to be spending quite a lot of time doing the same thing, just avoiding the striking and trying to get into a grappling match. And my concern with Ngannou is his fights have happened so quickly. Has he had the chance to learn how to take on somebody who is capable of grappling? And that was a problem he had, I felt, when I watched that other fight with Miocic, was, when Miocic had him down, there wasn't much he could do outside of just try to defend. He wasn't able to land. And I think Ngannou is going to be quite ready for that. I think he looks like he is a more sound puncher than he did in his first fight with Miocic. He was a bit wild in some of those movements. And I think he's got an economy of movement now that he didn't have before, which probably is why he's knocking people out much quicker. I'm finding it difficult, though, because Miocic has fought the same guy who's totally different, a shorter individual. This, Ngannou's the same height, similar reach, very imposing figure. I'm really struggling. It's a coin flip for me right now. But if anything, I'm leaning towards Ngannou having learned something and doing everything to stay out of a grappling match with Miocic.
So, yeah, great assessment, mate. My thoughts are that I've written off Stipe a few times, and at my peril. And he's someone that is like Jan Blachowicz, just largely overlooked as someone that just does the basics, the fundamentals so well, but is not the most powerful. He's not the fastest. He's technically not the sharpest, but he's just very good at all of those things. Like good wrestler, good at, like he's got it all, but we can kind of overlook his consistency and his way that he can adapt to styles. Now, one thing is undeniable is on paper, Stipe is currently going down as the world's greatest ever heavyweight. So on paper, and there's a reason I say on paper, there are heavyweights that have been more intimidating and more formidable and arguably more dominant during the fights that they've been in. For example, you've got Fedor, who was a Russian fighter who is, well, you see him, sure, he's one of the scariest guys. He's got his blue crystal eyes and he's got this death stare. It's like Hannibal Lecter. He would come down to the ring with like no emotion. And if he beat you up, he wouldn't show any emotion. He's like a cold killer. And he was undefeated for 10 years. And then he went into, I think it was Strikeforce, and fought Fabricio Verdum, and Verdum submitted him. The first guy to defeat him in 10 years. And up to that point, people are saying Fedor is like unbeatable. Now, Stipe beat the Doom to get the title. So he beat someone that beat the giant, like he was the giant killer, and then he beat the giant killer. He's beaten DC, who was, although he lost to John Jones at light heavyweight, DC used to fight at heavyweight and was undefeated. So he's beaten DC twice. He's beaten pretty much everyone that's been put in front of him. He's beaten all of the big names. And for that reason, and because he's held the heavyweight title for more consecutive times than anyone else, he's on paper the greatest ever. Although people will argue, I would argue, Cain Velasquez in his prime, who was DC's training partner, actually had more weapons, and I think he would have taken Stipe. But we can't prove that. I can't prove it. It's just hearsay. But so for that reason, I'm backing Stipe because everyone writes him off. I think that Ngannou is going to have improved, but in 3 years, he can't make up for the deficit he has had from Stipe's life of learning about that. So he could definitely get knocked out in the first round. Absolutely, because he got close to getting knocked out last time.
Yeah.
So if Francis touches him, he's in a world of trouble. But I think if he gets, the later this goes, the more and more trouble Francis is in because of his weight. Yeah. It's going to look bad for him. He really wants an early KO, 1 or 2 rounds. Otherwise, I've got to go Stipe. So I'm leaning Stipe.
I'm going to go. I think we're going to be going again on divergent paths on this. I'm going to go Ngannou cool. Second round. For me, I think he's, because I agree. I think if it goes past the second round, I think I'm going to be thinking I'm wrong here. The reason I think second round, I think Miocic is a very intelligent fighter. I think he's going to know enough to stay out of reach of Ngannou. There's going to be a point where he is going to have to engage Ngannou, and I think Ngannou is much more prepared. I think if you look at DC in his first fight, he did a really good job of using the jab to keep in the middle, keeping Miocic or Stipe at bay. I think Ngannou is I think he's learned a lot from the last fight, but I also think the fact that he has fought a smaller individual who I think is not as good a fighter as Ngannou over the last 3 years, I think that's a big factor for me because he's not had the same experience that Ngannou has in the ring with the diversity of characters, and he's just doesn't have the time in the ring. I think that's going to have a huge impact on this.
So I would challenge you on that. DC would be recognized as one of the greatest UFC fighters of all time. He's up there. He lost to arguably the greatest John Jones and now Stipe. So those two, you could argue, Stipe is argued as one of the greatest of all time. So if they're fighting each other, 2 of 3 people in like the debate of, okay, I don't think anyone's debating DC is the greatest of all time, but he is right up there. Francis Ngannou's competition, I don't think you could class in the same league as that. So he's been fighting, I'm going to put in air quotes here, inferior competition, but he's done it emphatically.
So, and this isn't me saying, I'm saying in this comparison, I think Ngannou, and I'm not talking because I don't know enough about DC's history. I think looking at these fights, those were very good fights between Stipe and DC for the most part. But I look at Ngannou at this stage over the last 3 fights to be the superior opponent. And I think for me, just the time in the ring, the diversity of people that he's been up against. And I think the fact that DC is a smaller individual is it's a complete change in who he's fighting. And I think it's just that diversity and that experience over the last 2 years is going to help Ngannou evolve a bit more. This is that's just why I'm leaning that way. And I think my ignorance to DC might be hampering me here, but I'm still leaning towards that experience piece because that height and reach is, he's been training for the same person for the last 3 years, who's physically a very different fighter. And is DC much of a grappler as well?
Olympian wrestler.
Yeah.
So he's like cream of the crop wrestling. And so the fight when Miocic fought Ngannou to start with, the fight after that for Ngannou was against Derek Lewis, who's the Black Beast. He was on Rogan, by the way, and he was fantastic on that. That was one of the worst heavyweight fights in history because they stood there almost for 3 minutes and no one. That
was the
shot.
Fight you were talking about. Yeah,
that is embarrassing. Right now, DC fought Derek Lewis and mopped him up very much like Stipe did. He wrestled him. He wrestled a guy to the ground and manhandled him and won the title. It was boring, but he did what needed to get done because, like Ngannou, it's like the same thing. Ngannou and Derek Lewis, you do not want to get punched by them. You don't want to get touched. But Stipe and DC used the same tactic. They took this big guy down and just overwhelmed them. So you could say that Ngannou fought Derek Lewis and lost on the decision of a terrible fight that they were both losers, really. And Derek Lewis is embarrassed by that fight, by the way. But DC was able to overwhelm Derek Lewis. So again, it's UFC maths. It's like, well, he beat him, therefore he beats him. It never works out like that. But you probably are undercutting DC's effectiveness. But I would say that I can hear what you're saying. Miocic has been focusing on a person that's very different, a different skill set, different size, different frame for 3 years. And you're saying that Francis has gone, had to deal with different types of characters and different skill sets. And there's a strength to that. And I think there's an acknowledgement from me of that. I think you might be over-egging it, but I still don't know that either. And I think it's a fair point you're bringing to the table.
I'm going to stick to my guns on that one. I was so taken back by how I've never seen a fighter, and I was impressed with Usman when we watched him. I became a fan of Jan, just the personality and the skill, and just the just how tidy everything was with him. But with Ngannou, it was with every fight that I watched, the last 4 fights I watched, it was when he connected, it was one connection, and it was just like. That every time in those 3 fights, it was that one punch. There was a wobble, and he was in like that. He's quick, and if he can stay out of reach, and I think the secret to him is to just stay the fuck away.
Take down defense.
Yeah, just stay out of it. Just jump, run like hell, and then counter. And I think he's in with a shot. Because I think the one thing I will say, when you compare Jan, who's a lighter guy, to Stipe, Stipe moves actually better. I think I would say he's got a little bit more agility than Jan does. When you watch him fight, not much, but he has deceptive quickness, I think. And as long as Ngannou is prepared to stay the fuck away, I think he's all right. But it has to be second round for him. He's got to catch him in the second round.
Mate, look, this is what I love about the UFC. I'm saying I'm back in Stipe. I'm leaning Stipe. Let me be clear, because I could totally see Ngannou winning.
I'm leaning,
and the bookies have got, I think, Ngannou. So Stipe again is the underdog, which has made me think you cannot bet against Stipe as an underdog. He keeps on coming back and beating people. And let me just preface this with something else now, Sean, that now supposedly the winner of this is going to fight John Jones, who people argue, along with Khabib, who we're going to touch on in a minute, as the greatest of all time. So John's coming up to heavyweight. He's been piling on the pounds with some powerlifting and bodybuilding, and supposedly he's going to be taking on the winner of this. So it's one to watch and keep an eye out for, because there's a nice little story follow-up. If Miocic takes down Ngannou and he just does something similar to the first fight, I don't think they're going to be fighting again. But if Ngannou beats him, you've either got a rematch, or you've got John Jones coming in the mix, which John Jones taking on either of those two is going to be exciting. So I can't wait.
Well, this leads on to the next point I want to transition into, because I want to talk about Michael Chandler versus Charles Oliveira. And the reason I want to bring this up, you said, and this is what caught me off guard, because this was the first fight that I ever covered. One of the first fights, the Michael Chandler, was it Hooper?
Dan Hooker.
Hooker, sorry. Fucking idiot I am. John Hooper. It's Michael Chandler.
Got a H and 2 O's.
That's right.
Halfway there.
That was before that was right around the Kuzman fight. So the Chandler, you said this is a title fight.
Yeah, that's correct. So this week, breaking news: Khabib has announced he's given up the belt. He's retiring. So that's official. The lightweight belt is now therefore up for grabs at 155 pounds. There was some debate that Poirier and McGregor were going to have a rematch for the title fight, but instead, Dana's announced that Charles Oliveira, who is going to be taking on Michael Chandler for that is going to be a title fight for the vacant belt, which I am really surprised by. Like, look, let me state by saying those two are absolutely capable of being world champions. Well, they're going to be, but I mean, whoever you could argue should be in a position to fight for a title, those two guys could be. Like, I believe that from what I've seen. But we can't help but look at the evidence behind it. Michael Chandler came from Bellator, where he wasn't the champion. He was a previous champion, but wasn't the standing champion. Came over to UFC, fought Dan Hooker, who's a very respectful, tough guy in that division. He can hold his own. But he beat him convincingly.
He owned him.
But you would think that would set him up for a fight, perhaps for a Dustin Poirier or for a Conor or for a Justin Gaethje, who just fought for the belt. And Charles Oliveira has looked phenomenal. Like, he's actually probably the person to challenge Khabib because of his jiu-jitsu background. Now, Charles Oliveira beat Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson and Khabib, they were trying to fight each other for, I think they had 5 fights scheduled and all fell through. Tony Ferguson was undefeated for something like 9 years, and he was destroying everyone he fought. He lost to Justin Gaethje. Justin looked phenomenal, but Charles Oliveira wiped the floor with Tony Ferguson, and Tony is one of the hardest human beings alive. So look, let me put this in perspective. Tony was coming off a lot. He was coming down. He lost to Justin Gaethje, then fought Charles Oliveira and lost again. So he was on the slide. So to put him in, Charles Oliveira, directly for a title fight, so let me summarize this in one sentence. I think, Sean, that Chandler and Oliveira, 2 amazing talents, should be fighting to set the winner of that is going to be fighting for the title. In my opinion, they shouldn't be fighting for the title right now.
I agree. I struggle with the whole idea of Chandler. Not that Chandler doesn't deserve a big fight. He doesn't deserve to win the title after. I mean, it's difficult to say if he beat someone like Oliveira. When I looked at the all of the fighters sort of in line, I thought Gaethje looked like the strongest on paper as far as a title contender next to Dustin Poirier, who I believe Poirier beat. Did he beat? Wasn't Chandler? Did he beat Chandler at one point?
No, they haven't fought because Chandler was in a different.
No, he beat Oliveira, hasn't he?
No, so I don't know if they fought. He beat Justin Gaethje. So currently, the 1 and 2 now, Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje have fought each other, and Poirier won. He knocked him out. So you could say they've already fought. That's already a done piece. However, that was a few years ago, and I would love to see that again.
I think for Chandler, I'd like to see him either fight Oliveira, Ferguson, or McGregor. To really, because I think for me, if he gets absolutely smashed in this fight, and there's a possibility he could very much be outclassed. He won't necessarily be, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Oliveira overwhelms him, and this fight's over, in a submission in a round. If that happens, that makes this fight a bit of a joke. In some ways, he hasn't earned his right for that fight, and if he loses with ease, what was the whole point of this exercise? Was this really a title fight at the end of the day?
So my thoughts on why is this a title fight? This is the uneducated Hugh, not listen to anyone's thoughts on this. This is just coming from the heart. Like, this is a money play. The UFC undoubtedly, statistically, have more money on their pay-per-view buys, more eyes watching when there's a title fight. Now Khabib has hung up the belt. There's a vacant title. So we need a title as soon as possible. Which is the next biggest fight? Oh, it's these 2. Let's make it a title fight. Let's get it done. When money has overwritten the sport side of things on this. Entertainment has surpassed what really the sport, the true sport fans should follow. So it's unfortunately, they do this at times. That's my view on it, really.
So it's confusing to everybody. It sounds like, because why would it be a money play though? Because surely they can still. Is it because they're fighting for championship money, for belt money? Is that what you're?
All of the above. There's a belt at the end of it, so it's like it means everything. So we're going to have a brand new champion. And because there's that extra thing on the line, Sean, there's that extra, there's stakes here. Like, someone is going to be a world champion for the first time. Chandler is going to be a organization champion, or Charles Oliveira will be for the first time a champion, and he looks amazing. So it's there's a little bit more intrigue about who's going to win, and who people. The vast majority of fans were going to watch this anyway because it's going to be a cracking fight no matter what. And I love that the fact they're fighting. It's just the question mark over the title. So for me, that question mark is not a mystery. It's filled because of money, and there's going to be more eyeballs on it because there's a belt up for grabs.
Yeah.
Can I just speculate slightly?
Hmm.
I also going to speculate that there may, so I could be talking arse, but there may be some pressure to have a certain number of title fights as well because of what I've just explained,
Right. Okay.
by an organization of ESPN.
So because this division hasn't had a title, because Khabib has, I don't know if you would class it as holding up the division, because this division has been fairly static as far as the champion's
Do you
concerned.
want to get it going?
Yeah, because for me, my preference would be, and this would be my natural inclination to see the top four, as we said, what would happen in the middleweight division, not the middleweight division, the
Welter.
well, no, sorry, in the welter, that they just fight out for it. That you have the who's going to be
exactly.
So the top four, you have
Yeah.
Chandler taking on Oliveira, fine. Gaethje takes on Poirier, fine. The winner of those two will fight for the belt. That to me seems like the most logical way to do it.
They've done that before as well. They've had these kind of like title contender fights, and I think from a sporting perspective, it makes sense. But I think they're just looking at it from a money perspective and wanting to fill that belt as soon as possible. I think it's more of a timing thing. But look, is it the end of the world? Not really, because one of these two guys, the winner of these two, would be next in line for a title fight anyway. So it's not the end of the world, because let's say Poirier, who's number one contender, he's got to be fighting for the title next. Whether that's a rematch for Conor or whether that's with Gaethje, I think they're probably the main two at the moment. And then the winner of that would then take on the winner of this. So it's not like Dustin could have had first crack at it, arguably, if Dustin versus Gaethje, for example, gets put ahead. But if he backs himself to win the title to have beaten Gaethje, he'll be given a title shot next anyway. So it's, it's not the end of the world. It's just, it's a slippery slope, really, Sean, isn't it?
It's a slippery slope. To those of you who haven't tuned in, we got to remember, people weren't there for the slippery slope argument.
I know.
Yeah,
that was for you. That was just for you.
Yeah, that was for me. So just so everybody knows, slippery slope arguments are full of shit, and Hugh uses them all the time. So who I'm going to be guessing on this one, because I don't have as much film to watch on Chandler. My expectation is Oliveira. Fucking names in the UFC.
Oliveira is how people say it.
I think he's winning this fight. I think he's winning by submission. I'm just going to chuck out a number in the third round.
I think I'm going to go Oliveira as well. He just looks so good.
He was impressive when I watched him.
He does look phenomenal. And Chandler's a wrestler, so there is the chance that Chandler's explosive on his feet and he can knock him out for sure. Charles Oliveira is very erratic on his feet because he can afford to be, because when it goes down to the ground, he's going to take over. So if it goes to the ground, which Chandler would probably like in a lot of other fights, it won't play into Chandler's hands because Oliveira's technique is going to overwhelm him. So I'm with you on this one, Sean.
Yeah, I got a sense that he's almost going to want to. Chandler's quite, from what I've seen, is very aggressive, a very aggressive fighter. And I think that is going to sort of fall into a trap that Oliveira is going to want to set. He's the few fights I saw, is how he turns things around on the ground so quickly. It's, you can think you have him. I saw his submission of Ferguson. And by the way, credit to Ferguson for having somebody breaking his arm and not tapping out.
He's made of steel.
I was looking away. Because he was in a position where Ferguson could not get out. He was in. It was just tap out. And the referee had to stop the thing because he was going to break his arm.
No. So he didn't tap out. That was the end of the round.
I know.
So
is that what happened?
He beat him on decision. Yeah, it's the end of the round. So he didn't tap out. That's Tony Ferguson is a savage, mate. He's built of something else.
Getting the cheap YouTube free. Sorry, UFC. I got totally burned by the free follow up from YouTube. But still, I mean, he wasn't going to tap out.
No, he would have broke his arm. He would have broke his arm over getting tapped out.
But it was that takedown. I think at that point, the way watching him work and get into position, and it just I remember thinking, of a lot of the fighters I've seen, he is so awkward, but not because he's awkward, because he's just so difficult to read, and so the skill is there. It's like when you and I you started grappling. Was it jiu-jitsu? No, not jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu.
And you introduced me to submission hold. So we were, we had our shirts off, a little red wine,
bit of oil, usual Friday night.
But we were just sort of wrestling, and because I have no training whatsoever. I'm just a big lump. And what and this, it reminded me of this, the stuff you were doing, I wasn't prepared for, to get me into a hold. And I had a sore throat for like 3 days after you put me into it. I genuinely did, because it scared the shit. I'm like, fuck,
I know. Yeah.
couldn't tap fast enough. And I was reminded of that with Oliveira, because how he went from the position he was in to getting, the arm, is it an arm bar, or I don't know what you would call it?
Yeah, that's right.
To get that arm bar was just like, fuck, that
Beautiful.
happened quick. And it wasn't like just, some nobody. It was a tough, strong, smart fighter that he was able to do that to. So the reason, and I think that's why I'm more confident about Oliveira than I am about Ngannou, because of that experience level and that lack of in the division with Chandler. So we'll see if that propagates itself.
I just want to give Chandler, I've got to go with the caveat that Chandler is very, we saw firsthand how dangerous he could be on his feet as well. And Charles Oliveira's got his work cut out on his feet. Charles Oliveira is very erratic. He's got a lot of skills, his kicks, and he's awkward on his feet. So they're going to cause issues for each other. But make no mistake, if this goes to the ground, Chandler's it has issues. On its feet, Chandler has every chance to knock him out and finish him. I'm going to lean on Oliveira, but that's what I love about fighting. This could easily go both ways. So I'll be tuning in for sure, and it should make for a cracking fight.
So
I think we're going to. I'm going to finish. I think it will be a great fight as well. I think this is going to be one of the two guys that are not going to back down. They're going to go for it.
Did I say second or third round?
Ngannou second, you said.
I said second, but what did I say about Oliveira? I said Oliveira. I thought I said third for Oliveira. Third round tap out. I don't know. Was that a technical? Not a technical knockout. That's what would you call that in the UFC world? If it's not a knockout, submission. Thank you. I was blanking on that. Because you haven't really. Because part of this, we're betting against each other in many ways. You get points for choosing the round, and you haven't chosen the round in this one.
So in Stipe, it's going to be a Stipe victory by decision. That's going to go the distance. I don't think he's going to finish Ngannou. Okay. And for this fight, I am going to state Oliveira by decision.
So are we? So I'm saying third round.
I'm going to say
submission,
5 rounds for
5 round submission. And if you feel, and that's
5
the
round
thing,
decision,
and I'm saying submission third round.
Yeah.
So we've got everything documented, and I think we just have a little bit of housekeeping to move on to. One last point, I think that we were going to raise. There is one other fight in a totally different world, and that is Fury v. Joshua, finally confirmed. We're going to do our picks on this, but there's been a lot of interesting build up to this, with Tyson Fury either being a troll or being old Tyson Fury, with comments that media are going apeshit about him eating healthy but drinking shitloads of whiskey or whatever it was he was saying. People worried about his fitness. Anthony Joshua, Anthony Joshua's in peak condition right now and could probably fight today. But I think that Tyson Fury right now, I think we would both agree, is the superior fighter.
Technically, without a doubt, yeah. Hands down.
I think, and I said this before, I think Joshua is one of the more problematic fighters to take on for Fury right now, because expectation being in Fury's camp, I think, benefits Joshua. And I think Fury is not somebody who's going to knock out Joshua. I don't think Joshua is nervous about being knocked out. I think Joshua would be more worried about a fight with the bomber than Fury. So I think that adds a little bit of power in Joshua's camp, but I'm not sure I'm ready to pick him. I need to examine it a bit more.
Yeah, I'm Fury all the way. I think Fury can knock him out, and he showed that with Deontay Wilder recently. So if he kind of takes on that form, I could totally see that. Where I'm in agreement with you is that I don't think it works in his favor that like he's the expected winner. Like how hungry is like you said, there's some headline stuff. I don't follow boxing as closely as I do UFC, but I've seen enough of Tyson Fury's interviews to know, and I watched his ITV documentary, which was brilliant, like a 4-part documentary with his family. And he does admit that he does need fighting as a motivation, because without it, he will go down the drinking and partying and, lose his stuff a little bit. And the fact that this fight wasn't done earlier, like when Joshua hadn't lost to Andy Ruiz, if this had gone into that fight, I think there'd be way more hype behind Joshua. And I'd be really worried that Joshua's is going to suffer. But this plays more into Joshua's hands. However, I think just technically speaking, I'm going to back Fury. that he is going to be disciplined enough and trained for it, and he's going to. I could see him knocking him out, but I think it's more likely he's going to win on decision.
Yeah,
Decision Davis over here.
Yeah, we will see. Yeah, we will see. Because I'm leaning that way, but the things I'm thinking in the back of my head that I need to look into more are Fury's length of time that he hasn't really been training and his propensity for the good things in life. Joshua is a unit, and he is one of the most disciplined boxers probably in the division. And I just, for me, I'm really having trouble writing off Anthony Joshua because I did when he fought Klitschko. And I think Klitschko, in many respects, isn't a similar proposition. I think Fury moves like no other guy his size. And I think that's a big difference from Klitschko and the fact that he's a southpaw. But the fact that Joshua showed up and was able to take I think Klitschko's a bigger puncher, was able to get up from a knockdown from Klitschko, means he's not to be written off in this Fury fight.
I would agree from the knockout stance. Yeah, I think that from a technical standpoint, I don't think anyone can stand with Fury, and that's the gaping hole in this.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think that if if Joshua lands, Fury's in trouble. Like
Big
Joshua
time.
has knockout power, like that is for certain. But Fury prides himself on how elusive he is and how difficult he is to
He's incredible.
hit. Yeah. So I can't help but see it that way. And I want to add to this just to wrap it up from my end, Sean, was I kind of don't mind who wins on this one either, because I really like both of them for different reasons. I love the personality of Fury and his background, what he stands for. And Joshua is just such a fantastic human being. I just kind of wish him all the best. And I hope we see a great fight of two men giving it their best and going at it and let the best man win.
Yeah, well, when we get to a week out from that fight, we're gonna have to put our money where our mouth is anyway, and put our prediction in place. I don't
think I'll change, but I'm happy to do that.
There's a part of me here that there's something in me that's saying Joshua is gonna win this.
Because of how adamant I am on Fury? Is that turning you that way?
No, well, I mean, I think that the fact that you thought Fury, I think generally if I go the other way, it's probably the best way to go.
Well, yeah,
what I've learned.
The bookies would back that. There's some evidence in that.
I've gone on a journey with Josh because I've watched him early on, and I'm a supporter of both fighters, and I wasn't. And Tyson Fury, I think, is more intriguing to me because I didn't like him, and now I like him quite a bit as a person, as a personality.
Yeah.
So it's not as if I favor one over the other. I don't, but I really Joshua as a fighter, and even more so, people will disagree with me than Dylan White or who's the other one? Dylan White, the other fighter, American, big puncher,
Deontay Wilder.
Deontay Wilder. Those guys, they're sort of in a similar ilk, but there's just something about the way Joshua, the way he throws a punch, to me, it just seems a little bit more condensed and controlled. And, he kind of has the best of both worlds. And sometimes I think he loses it in his sort of mind game and how he goes about the fight. And I think if he gets his mind games right, I think, he can catch Fury. And I'm really having a hard time picking against him. But this is something I have to sort of get my head around. I'm 50-50 right now.
Interesting.
So yeah. Well, anyway, good time, Hugh, this week. We will see what happens. We'll do the post game after UFC 260. So to everybody again, please do join us next week for the next show. We will be going to live stream again at some point. We're going to see once we get a few more followers on board. But right now, please do like and subscribe. Comment, who do you think is going to win the fight? Is it going to be Ngannou, Stipe, or Miocic? I'm learning all these names. I'm killing it with these names. Fury, Joshua, if you want to pop that in now, tell us what you think. Or Chandler, Oliveira, who do you think will win that one? And we do get comments, people telling us what they think. We will read those comments. We do every week. And yeah, that's us done for this week.